All right, and we're live. What's up, Steven? How's it going?
Hey Taylor, thanks for chatting with me today. Of course, you and
Yeah,
I never have anything to talk about, even though we just met each other. So
we did,
fast
but we
friends.
we had a nice warm introduction from was it Taylor Pearson?
Taylor Pearson, great guy.
Yeah, so that goes a long way.
Okay.
Um, but for all you guys watching today, I have Stephen Warley with me. Stephen's the founder of Life Skills That Matter, and somebody that I'm quickly growing in my admiration and respect for, and excited to talk to you today, Stephen. As I was researching you before our last call, um, probably the thing that stuck out the most to me was how I want to say how principled you are and how you explain things and teach things, and sort of as you like introspect about, and we'll probably talk mostly about productivity today, but as I was looking at your writing, which I think, at least for me, writing, I have to introspect a lot and like wrestle with stuff and figure out like what's really the thing that I have to say about this, what's important. um, Over and over and over, your stuff always comes back to principles instead of tactics. And I'm always harping on this, either because I'm harping against or for. But I think it's, as I'm trying to ever learn anything in life, if somebody's just telling me a tactic, it really grates on me because I never, I never feel like I'm able to internalize the thing and apply it successfully, because there's such
I need to find a tactic.
a tactic is like, um, it's kind of do these 7 steps in order to get this result,
Hmm.
right? So I'll give you an example. Recently I've been reading. I read the first half of Gary Vee's latest book, Crushing It, and the whole book he's basically just talking about how it's important to care more. He's teaching about social media in this case, not
Right.
productivity, but he's talking about how really what my takeaway from the book was like the most important thing is to just care really deeply about your customers, and not even your customers, actually. It's just like the people that you're aiming to help. It's forget about business for a second. And so there's plenty of, let's just say, social media teachers out there who are basically saying, hey, you should like put this little thing in your image so that people can link back to it or whatever. I'm making stuff up because I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah, yeah.
jack
I
about
understand.
social media. But I was inspired by reading that, reading some of the stuff he wrote, because I was like, oh, I can connect to what that looks like for me, because I'm not like Gary Vee. I do occasionally say an F word, but I'm definitely not like Gary Vee in sort of the conspicuous ways. But you can, when you read a principle, which is, it's almost like a philosophy or something, then you can sort of more easily map it onto your own life. So um,
I'm
that
glad you get me. Thank you.
that just really stuck out for me, and it's what attracted me to wanting to connect with you in the first place. So that's my sales pitch to everyone else of why this is going to be a great conversation, why I dig Steven. And I
If I
wanted
could
to.
just add, if you want to see how principled I am, go read my disclosure agreement, my privacy and terms. Guaranteed, you have never seen them written that way.
Oh, there you go. I'm excited now to check it out. um,
You can actually understand them.
yeah, that's always a breakthrough somehow in the world of terms and conditions. um, so even though you have a really cool, successful online business, we could talk a lot about that. But I actually I want to start with just your origin story. And you alluded to how you spent the early years of your career really stuck. So I'd love to just start by having you share that story.
Just to also give a little framework. So I've been working for myself for 18 years before the word solopreneur was even a thing. And I also referred to myself as a reluctant entrepreneur because just like I think most people, we were taught to be employees, not to work for ourselves, taught to be afraid of it, taught that it was too risky, right? Uh, and I got laid off election day 2000. I was working in television news. I worked for CBS News, CNBC, worked at a .com owned by CBS at that time because the internet became this new thing. So I went to check it out. Got laid off at the .com bust of 2000. And everything was like going along great. I even think about, somebody who's like 32 right now. Life has been awesome for your career. You know what I mean? You're like, it's always been up. Like, it's never going to go down. Yeah, it's going to happen to you.
Kind of
Not
my
to rain on your parade. I'm a very pragmatic person,
well,
because people are a little delusional sometimes about the trajectory of their career. They think they have so much control over it, and I did too. Guess what? Economic trends and the economy and large global forces, you're teeny tiny. You get humbled, and that's a good thing. And that's kind of getting kicked out of the system led to this journey. So I'll let you jump in because I know.
oh, I was going to say, yeah, that's some quick math there, but yeah, you're right. And I don't know that I've ever considered myself lucky to have graduated from college in 2007 and then had everybody that I got a job with, lost their jobs, and that's a quick life lesson, but it actually is. And I think sometimes just having those like external shocks,
Yeah.
external stuff happen to you and force your hand can actually be really valuable.
Like one of my friends back in the day said, you know what happened to you, Stephen? You got knocked off your hamster wheel, right? And that's something we're going to talk about today. I think it's a really applicable is we're moving so fast now, things are changing so fast that we're just constantly reacting, right? And what we really need to do is actually stop, like full stop. Like getting laid off is a full stop. Somebody pull the emergency brake on my economic life. And all of a sudden I was like, well, I'm not moving anymore. And then when you're in this like woo space, all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's an inner voice in there. People aren't pressuring me to do things or ask things, or like, gosh, when I wake up in the morning, what do I do? And it really helped me realize how out of control my life was. I felt so safe. I felt so in control, but I was so dependent on these systems for my entire life and my self-worth and my being. And even those first 5 years, I still kept looking for a job, but I tried freelancing, consulting. I went back to business school, which I would not recommend if you want to work for yourself. Save you a lot of time and money. And it was a journey. Life kind of hit me in the face to like really start learning about myself. And that's the wild thing, Taylor. Nobody ever teaches you how to learn about yourself. Like it's the most important subject in life because you're going to have to deal with this all the time. And nobody ever tells you how to deal with it better.
So one of the things that I don't remember where you wrote this, but I was reading that you were finding yourself sleeping a lot during certain
that was one of my second stuck moments. After I got myself unstuck after 5 years, I was riding high again, had a great online business, did a lot of speaking. And then I hit a wall in 2014. I hit another deep stuck period. And that was like, oh, wow, just because you figured out how to get unstuck doesn't mean that it's not going to happen to you again. Okay. All right. Thanks again, life. And I think sometimes like stuck, there's a lot of shame around it. There's a lot of people probably watching us right now who are like, I feel stuck right now. I got this job, I'm miserable, I really don't like it, but I got to pay the bills. There's this other thing I want to do, but my social world, my parents, my wife, my boyfriend, girlfriend don't understand why I want to do this thing. So I feel like uncomfortable talking about it. And I think stuck is a really positive experience now that I've learned because that's where growth comes from. Like you realize the path behind you is no longer an option, but the path forward is unclear. So you don't know how to really take steps forward. So in this stuck moment, you really have to like deal with yourself. You have to like really ask yourself really hard questions that conventional employment, I think, allows us all to avoid. The hardest question in life, Taylor, what do you want to do with it? We do not like that question. Nobody ever wants to avoid it.
I wanted to ask about, whether it's the 2000 phase or the 2014 phase or whatever, but I think what I find really interesting about this is like, it's kind of easy to talk about stuck phases as valuable because when we emerge from them, it becomes clear that they are. But
I can give you a great visual. of the first stuck phase. Let me just quickly give this one.
Yeah.
I did laundry every 2 weeks at that time of my life. So I went to do laundry. It was like a laundromat, close by, so I was able to run down, throw my clothes in, and run back home. So I was taking the clothes out of the washer and putting them into the dryer. And I noticed there were only sweatpants. And anybody who knew me at that time, I didn't even own a pair of jeans. I was always pretty well dressed. I lived in New York in my 20s, so I was always like, I want to look decent. And I could still remember, it was a green pair of sweatpants. I can still hold them and see them being like, oh my God, you are stuck. This is what it looks like.
I'm impressed that you were still doing laundry every 2 weeks, but that's not the point of the story. So what I wanted to actually dig in on was like when, there's different variants of stuckness. And I think there's some that are like super obvious where you have that like green sweatpants moment and you're like, and you just feel deeply depressed. And then there's also just like sometimes day to day or week to week stuckness and divots and stuff like that. And I'm curious, like when you were going through it, what you've talked about managing your energy and instead of your time. I'm curious kind of like how you've mapped what you've learned about yourself and about being productive from those experiences of feeling stuck.
Yeah, so when you're in a stuck moment, there is no process. Let's get that out of the way, because you're in this foggy state, or you're in the brush and you got to start hacking away at a new trail. So while I think we're all craving like a routine, because humans, we like routine, it's part of our natural state. I think where we also get anxious is we've been forced into these unnatural routines that hierarchies, our work makes us submit to. That's why I think more and more people are feeling more anxious, because those are getting stronger and stronger as they change faster and faster. So I think it's funny when you go through those moments of being popped out of the system, there is it's kind of you have a burst of energy because there's so much relief. You're like, whew, all that energy kind of comes back into you. It's not being siphoned off by having to submit to something else that you're out of alignment with. But at the same time, it's a drag. There's a drain because again, your brain craves a plan like that. The base of your brain, the basal ganglia, the oldest part of the brain, one of the oldest parts of the brain, likes a plan, and it's freaking out because there's no plan, and that drains you, right? And also when every time everybody, so what are you doing, Stephen? What's going on? And I'm stuck is like not like, that's what you want to say, but it's not like socially acceptable. And then people don't know what to do with that, and they try to give you all this advice that is really what they would tell themselves, but it's not really applicable to you. So what I'm always telling people now to ride out these stuck moments, to manage your energy, is to realize that you're going to get stuck in your life. It's going to happen. These are positive moments. But to get myself to the first process of getting unstuck is recognizing that you're stuck, admitting it to yourself. You're like, okay, I'm stuck. And that's okay. We're always feeling like we have a lot of pressure, especially men in society, that we always have to have the answer, right? We always have to sound smart. And sometimes the smartest thing you can do for yourself is say, like, I'm stuck and I need to learn something new about myself or a way forward. I need to do an experiment. So step one is recognizing you're stuck. Step two is, even if you don't know exactly what you want to do, is that's where you got to tap back into your natural curiosity. And there's people who might be watching us who say, well, I never really thought of myself as that curious. So what I say to you is, guess what? You don't have a choice of whether you're curious or not. By the very nature of being a human being, you're curious. Why did somebody cut me off today? Why is that person wearing that colored coat? Why did that dog just poop in this place? Every time your brain pops a question to your head, that's curiosity. That's what's happening. So you don't have a choice of that. It's just starting to recognize that you're curious and starting to tap back into that inner voice. Like, I'm a big believer, not only of just habits over hacks, but listening to your emotions, listening to your gut, listening to your inner voice, not just your brain. There's that front part of our brain, right? The newest part of our brain that we think we're going to think our way out of everything. And when I bring people through my accelerator, the second I can see that they're frowning, I'm like, you're trying to think your way out of this. What am I going to tell you? To go talk to somebody, maybe do an experiment? I'm like, exactly. Again, humans, we were designed to work together, not all by ourselves. We were designed to collaborate. And that's how you get out of these stuck moments, because you have new perspectives, new insights, things that you didn't think of that you couldn't have planned out if you did not do an experiment. Because again, corporate America has infected all of us with perfectionism, right? Because corporations by their nature are very conservative. They don't like losing money. So they like things that are perfect. And that's why they give us, it's amazing right now, if you watch like broadcast television, they're bringing all the shows back from the 80s and 90s because there's zero creativity left apparently in Hollywood. So they just have to like recycle stuff. So when you're out here in the world, or the way I see the economy changing so fast, that stuck moment that you're going through needs to be our way of life now, because that's how you can actually ride out these stuck moments more quickly, or maybe even prevent some of them from happening in the first place. By constantly tapping to your curiosity, constantly wanting to learn something, constantly wanting to meet somebody new is how you can maintain unstuck. I'll just leave you with one final thought. Maybe we can include this in the Facebook group. I actually am a big believer in journaling. Do you journal every day? Write every day? Express yourself?
I don't, but I saw you wrote that and it got me thinking about it. I do journal anytime I feel stuck. That's
great. I mean, that's something.
First move.
Yeah, sometimes I'm very intermittent, but especially if you're thinking about really wanting to work for yourself or make a big life change, there's a lot of times people don't want to journal because I don't want to free write. I'm not a good writer. You could even draw if you want. Somebody in my accelerator recently said she did a scribble journal, even if it's just a sentence a day. The idea is to get thoughts out of your head, stop keeping them prisoner in your mind. So there's 4 questions. I call it a daily growth journal that I think everybody should ask themselves every day. Number 1, did I learn something new about myself today? Number 2, did I learn something new today in terms of a skill or a concept or a process that I want to learn more about? Number 3, did I meet somebody new today? Number 4, did I create something today? So these 4 questions are challenging you because guess what? I bet there's weeks that go by that most people answer no to all of those questions. But guess what? If you want to grow as a person, if you want to be happier, if you want to have more options in life, you better start finding a way to start answering yes to those questions more often.
This has spurred a couple thoughts for me. So one is Mark Manson published a new piece maybe yesterday. And
by the way, can I have a little, I'm going to do a little shout out to my ego. I admit it. I'm doing it right now. So I wrote an article about self-awareness. And at times when you type in self-awareness into Google, my article about self-awareness appears before Mark Manson's article, before the Wikipedia entry. So yeah, and by the way, people, I did not try to think about making it SEO. I just wrote a damn good article.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can't win that game anymore by gaming the system. So
well, like there's it, you just have to care.
So it sounds like we should all go read that article. Mark Manson.
Just Google it.
Yeah. The fastest way to find it. Mark Manson was saying how often people will email him and they'll have some question they lay out sort of at the beginning of the email. And by dint of simply writing this like introspective thing, by the time they get to the end of the email, they've actually resolved whatever it is just through the process of writing. So you and Mark agree, writing
he's great. I totally agree.
Can be valuable.
I mean, yeah, and I think that's another great example sometimes that this pop up of a lot of times we see a lot of people doing these things and our instinct is to copy them, right? And so when I really look at something about somebody like Mark Manson, we're actually like philosophically very similar, but we express it and explain it in very different ways. And that's okay, because there's people in the world that need to hear it in the way that Mark explains it. There's people in the world that need to hear the way that I explain it, either right or wrong. But you know, what's liberating back to like managing your energy and living and working this way is I get to be myself 100% of the time. I don't want to be somebody else. It takes too much energy. I mean, so many of us are stuck in jobs because we have to put on our job persona and our job suit. We go be an actor every day at work, and then we come home and we're like, oh God, now I can be myself again. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so the other thing it made me think of, and you're talking about curiosity and talking about feeling stuck, Um, there's this book, maybe written in the 70s, called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck. And he's a psychologist, psychiatrist, I don't know, one of those. And he explains that depression is kind of this like internal, almost subconscious recognition that something has to change. And it's almost like this first signal that the way things used to be is no longer working, or maybe it never worked. But the fact, you talk about how when you're feeling stuck, you need to sleep more. You're like processing all this stuff. I have a really similar experience where like suddenly I'll just find myself sleeping 11, 12 hours and what's going on there. And so I think applying this thing about curiosity could work really well there, where it's like, okay, I'm feeling this way. What if that's sort of like a biological or psychological signal that I need to just get curious, like what in my life needs to change, or what has changed that I'm not really embracing and just running with it. And what you just talked about getting to be yourself, I think has been, in my experience, one of the places where that comes up, where like as soon as you're in an environment, and the corporate one is kind of the classic obvious one, but frankly, like even a lot of our listeners have already broken free, so to speak. They're already doing their own thing, but I think it's really a continuous process, right? Of like,
well, because even a lot of times it irks me, like another one of my filters now, and I hate to say I don't like judging, but I can't help it. I have like a gut reaction now when people start like using every business term, marketing jargon, or fad term as they're talking about what they do. It's such a red flag for me. I'm like, you really don't care about what you're doing. You're just trying to sound like you know what you're talking about. And I think back to even when we're working for ourselves, too many people are enamored by the Silicon Valley way of building businesses. And I want to give people the freedom to say, that's one version. It's not right. It's not wrong. It might not be the one for you. It certainly is not the one for me. I don't want to be slave to investors. I don't want to be slave to obnoxious high growth. I actually want to give a crap about my customers, actually care about them, not just worry about my metrics. So anybody out there who is on the fence about that, you just want to be yourself, I'm giving you permission. You can do it and you can make money doing it.
I love that. And I think for me, one of the takeaways just from listening to you through this conversation is like, if you're feeling something internally, I mean, you could be listening to somebody talk and using jargon and stuff. I would guess that person is also feeling that dissonance themselves. And at the times when I'm feeling some kind of just gross negative emotion, there's probably some sort of, okay, like, in what place am I just performing, or like
for you, and that's what it is. It's like, it's actually, we're so disconnected from our bodies and our spirit and our mind. And let me tell you, I would have made fun of me 10 years ago. I just sounded woo-woo. But the more you actually can be self-aware and you can actually listen to other parts of your body, that is an efficient use of your energy. It's efficient use of your time. That's my body saying, Stephen, there's lots of people for you to be interacting with in the world. This person, not your person. Move along. And like when I talked to you, I mean, it was that reverse reaction. Even if we still haven't met in person, but we will at my self-employed holiday party, which I'm excited about. I felt a connection. You know what I mean? It was illuminating. I left our phone call energized, even more energized than when it started. And these are the things that we need to pay attention, that we've suppressed in ourselves. And even that inner voice. Eventually, I always tell people, you are going to run out of energy in terms of suppressing that thing that you might not even know that it wants to manifest itself and it wants to have it say. After a while, you're going to have to deal with yourself, because it just takes more and more energy as you get older to keep repressing that. So the most efficient way, most productive way to live your life and to manage your energy is just to be your damn self and accept yourself.
I'm getting another reflection again from this, which is, you talk about, I think maybe it's just because marketing oneself is a critical component of being a solopreneur.
Let's do this one. Come on, Taylor.
That if you're using language that you don't feel really resonates for you, it may be like a lot of the marketing teachers out there are are like strongly espousing a way and a lingo and a whole kind of system. And it's not right or wrong, but I know that I've experienced some of those, and you feel kind of this like shame, or you feel like this
I
need
feel dirty.
to adhere to something that either your skill set or your like, inner compass or something doesn't align with that. And so it feels really hard to follow that. And so one of my takeaways, or just kind of mapping onto what works for me, is like I've derived a lot more energy by sourcing a lot of my learning from writers, from resources that just resonate really strongly with me, and the words and the way they talk about things. And then suddenly I'll read something, and instead of being like, damn, I really don't want to do that thing, and that's like the thought bubble going off in my brain, I can't, I won't, I don't want to, then it's like, oh, like I actually start to feel more lighthearted about following through on what I've learned from that person.
And just to build on that, it's say a lot of times, I'm sure you've been in this situation. I have, especially if you're starting from almost nothing. It's about, you have to start somewhere, and I think there is value in that. What I'm encouraging people to do is to do experiments and to make things your own, not to follow somebody step by step. I mean, there's kind of that old adage, find somebody who you admire who's successful and copy everything that they did. I'm sorry to tell you, you're not going to be able to do that. Here's why. You are not them, and they are not you. They have different circumstances. They have a different personality. They have different energy, different financial resources. You can be inspired, and you can say, how can I make that as an experiment? And then how do I do that in my world? And the other thing is, in terms of building businesses, I always tell people, in terms of your marketing copy, you're a lot of times people are like, I'm going to find customers. I'm going to buy some Facebook ads and Google ads, throw up some landing pages, and gosh golly, I'm going to find my target market. You're not, because people clicking on things on the internet is different than actually having a conversation with a real live human. And when you're talking to people in person or in video, there's so much more information being passed between us beyond our words, right? And you can pick up on different things. And I'm sure Taylor and I have been doing that to each other. So I'm always telling people, you want to listen to the people that you want to help, and you actually really want to start paying attention to the language. How do they describe their problem? How do they describe their solution? How do they describe what's frustrating? Like it bugs me, like a lot of times, like I'm going to boost your revenue. Solopreneurs, like a lot of solopreneurs I want to work with, they don't want to boost their revenue. They just want to make more money. And so that's the language I use. And that's where you have to really think about not using that marketing speak, because then it sounds generic. It doesn't sound unique. You're not going to stand out. You're just going to sound like everybody else. So use the language of the people that you want to help. That's my nugget there.
So there's a lot that we could talk about. I noticed you've used the word experiment a few times, and I'm curious to just hear a little, tell us like what does that mean? How do we do more successful experiments?
We have to act like scientists. So there's something you think you want to do that you can't find an answer for. You can't Google it. You've asked people. And I always tell people that you can listen to us till the cows come home. You can listen to the podcast, read every book on the shelf and about productivity. You can download every online course there is. At the end of the day, until you do it for yourself, you will never truly know. Learning to me is doing. It's very black and white. You can get started. You can consume this research and information to inspire you to take an action. But until you take an action, you haven't truly learned. Because you have to know how it feels for you.
So what makes it an experiment versus just taking an action?
Because great question. Because a lot of times, say if I would say to people, you should go to bed an hour earlier every night, right? Now, that's a broad thing, because we all are slightly different, but I do believe in consistent bedtimes. But because a lot of times we take that, like, I'm going to do it, I'm going to commit to doing that. And then you do it, and it almost feels like you fall off after a week or 2 weeks. And you never give it a shot, and you're like, I just couldn't do it, so I just gave up on it. But if you turn it into like a 2-week or 30-day challenge as an experiment, what you've done to your brain is, again, your brain likes certainty, it likes plans. You said to your brain, listen, let's just give this a shot. worst comes to worst, it'll be over in 30 days. But you allow yourself to push through the learning curve, even when it gets really, really hard, because that's when you start learning about yourself. And you've given something a chance. Then 30 days comes, the worst case scenario is you will always have to learn something about yourself by doing that experiment. And best is you decide that you want to keep doing it, you're going to make adjustments. So it's think like a scientist, have an assumption, set up like an action you're going to take. I would do it over a specified period of time. Some experiments I only do for like a day because they're like really hard. I want to be aware when I just react and I don't think. Like that's hard to do for an entire week. And that happens more than we'd like to admit inside of one day. Let me tell you, I would recommend doing that as a challenge. Every time you like react, whether like angry, happy, cry, whatever, write it down.
It's a good one for married people. Really anyone with a relationship.
It's such a waste of energy. It's dumb.
So I am imagining that some of I'm going to call them productivity techniques, which is
good. I want to
a random umbrella, but I'm imagining a lot of this stuff emerged out of experiments for you, and I'd love to just dig into a few of them.
And can I just quickly set up my philosophy about productivity?
Yeah, do it.
Number one, there's no one size fits all. That was an illusion that came out of corporate America that needed very specific standards of what productivity is. And it kind of bugs me. There's a lot of well-meaning productivity experts out there who will say, work for me, it's going to work for you. Again, you have to have a little skepticism there and saying, okay, that seems really interesting. I'd like to try that. Try it in your life. And don't feel bad if it didn't work for you, or don't feel bad if you decide to make some adjustments to make it work for you, because you're going to learn about yourself. So there's no one size fits all productivity. And as Taylor alluded to before, I believe in habits over hacks. So for example, if you want to start running, the first action is not going and buying a pair of new sneakers. Deal with the ones that you have. Prove to yourself that you're going to actually start a habit of running. Then you can level up. And that's where I think tactics help us deepen our habits. But too many of us want to buy something. We think that's the way to start our habits. It's actually doing the thing first. Make the best use of what you have.
Do an experiment, in other words. So, all right. So one of the things you've written about that I would love to hear more about, how you came into it, what was the problem it was solving for you, just kind of the backstory and the principle, the weekly self-assessment review.
Sure.
Yeah.
That grew out of being stuck when I had a lot of time to think about myself. I remember I should have saved it all. I was like a crazy person. I would have all kinds of pads. Like I would just start writing all kinds of scrawls and things that anything came out of my head. Nobody even told me to do it. I just felt compelled to I need to write stuff out. I'm going to write all my ideas out in those first few months of being laid off. And I've lost my train of thought. Remind me of your question again.
Where did it come from? What problem was it solving? What was sort of the origin story of this weekly review?
Oh yeah. So what I also realized, I came to realize it's wow, how do I know what I'm going to be doing every day or every week in a more intentional way? If I want to stop reacting, if I want to stop doing what I think everybody else expects of me, how does that start? And so you actually, I think coming out of that stuck moment, and then when I did start working again, and then when I didn't have that reflection time, I realized whoa, I need reflection time in my life on a regular basis. And the funny thing is, at a time when we need self-reflection more than ever, we think we have no time for it. And I think people also don't know how to do it or why it's so important. So I often tell people, you need to schedule an appointment on your calendar. You're your most important client. You put an hour a week on the calendar, where you're going to go, what are some things you're going to, I'm sorry?
Use FocusMate.
Use FocusMate. You can, and what you're going to do, and then make a very short list of what's going to prevent you from that hour, like a health emergency, a family emergency, or the world's going to end. Otherwise, even if your boss asks you to do something, you tell them you already have an appointment, because it has to be that sacred. And the idea here is, as the world keeps changing faster and faster and faster and faster, If you're going to just keep reacting to that, what's going to happen is you are going to be running like a mad woman or a mad man, super fast in a way that you don't even realize if you're running in the right direction anymore. And the only way you're going to realize if you're running in the right direction is you got to stop once a week to say, how did last week go? What was working? What was not working? What's annoying me right now? What's making me really happy? And the more you can start bringing that attention to yourself, that's how you can really start directing your life in a more responsive, intentional way and a less reactive way. I think most of us live life in a very reactive way. We overprize how much work we have to do and all the responsibilities that we have. In the span of 10,000 years of human civilization, the way we live is not normal, and it's not healthy, and it's not sustainable.
There's actually research that shows that, number one, doing reflection and planning, which can often be quite linked, increases our productivity. But we don't do it enough because it doesn't feel as good as executing tasks. So the research, it drew this line
which I call productive procrastination. You're doing work that
right,
just doing something, but it doesn't have any intentional impact.
So I think that's kind of cool to delineate between like reflection and execution, and to realize that pretty much always that we're biased towards this, and that all of us could be more productive by having more regular reflection.
Because there's 10 things to do, but you only have, I love this one. A little test to everybody out there. You can answer to yourself. I'll ask the other two. You're awake on average 16 hours a day. How many hours a day do you have to do your most productive, most high quality work? How many hours a day?
I'm gonna guess 4 hours.
Did you read one of my articles?
I think that's out there somewhere.
It is. It's about 3 to 4 hours. I was a history major, so I've read my fair share of biography, so it keeps showing up as a habit, as a pattern. I think it's the Daily Ritual. It's a book. I forgot to word it. They profiled I think over 150 or about 150 artists, philosophers, scientists throughout the ages. They all worked about 3 to 4 hours a day. Anybody who worked more than that generally used drugs.
So Cal Newport has also, I think I might have got it from Cal Newport. His book is called Deep Work.
Yeah.
It's about, it's a particular form of work. I suppose we could do laundry for more than 4 hours a day and you'd be okay. But if you want to do original creative work, if you want to do something that requires learning and integrating things from different places, basically challenging high value work, that we're going to peak out around 4 hours.
I always tell kind of people to start to know how to build a workday that works for you. The first thing is you have to identify your peak performance period, which is about this 4 hour window. And for me, it's 7 in the morning to 11 in the morning. So I know that's when I have to do, I'm making an exception for you. Usually I do all my connection activity in the afternoon. But we're doing this just before Thanksgiving, so my schedule is going to be a little screwy today. But generally, that's when I do my writing. I do write proposals, or I'm working on trainings or blog posts or podcasts, because I'm in the zone, I'm ready to go. And I can feel 11 o'clock's rolling down. I'm like, man, this blog post is starting to take a lot longer to write. And I know I have to stop and I have to come back at it tomorrow. I can't write a blog post after 8 o'clock at night. This doesn't happen for me. And it's okay. And that's the other thing, we beat ourselves up. You're like, but I want to be like that guy. We believe that building businesses or building our lives is reliant on sheer will and brute force. Those are limited energy sources. The more you can honor your inner voice, be aligned with your purpose, your values, your needs, and your abilities, and be yourself, that is a more efficient use of your energy. And you're actually going to feel more energized in the work that you're going to do. And you're going to energize other people, so you're going to make more money, be happier. Very counterintuitive.
So, weekly self-assessment review. My core takeaway is this is a forcing function to make sure that you have enough reflection in your life, that you're being intentional.
Just check in with yourself. It's not just saying it's actually saying in the same way you would ask your friends and family, how are you doing? You got to do that to yourself. How you doing? Talk to yourself. It's okay. You're by yourself. Nobody's going to think you're crazy.
So I think we have time to look at maybe one more of these.
How about value? Can we do values?
Yeah, I was gonna
See, this is what I love. See, Taylor, we're good.
It's hard. I want to be greedy and ask you about all the others, but so you've got this thing you've written about pretty extensively called Your First Rule of Personal Productivity. And as you alluded to, it's all about values. So same question. I would love to hear the origin story for this and sort of like what it emerged out of, sort of how you figured out this rule.
I'm going to admit that one's a little cloudier, but it was a lot more. I think it was when I got laid off. I remember the first things I said to myself. I said, "There's got to be another way. This can't be it. This cannot be how life is supposed to go. This can't be how work is. I'm a very smart, highly motivated person, very creative. This can't be my only option." So I think maybe it started in that regard to say like this mission of how do you find your own option then in a world that doesn't want you to find your own option? Really, that's what's happening here, people. We have an entire educational system preventing you from thinking for yourself. And even though you think you are. So this concept of values, it's not in the way that I think most people have understood what a value is. How would you define a value?
I've probably spent more time thinking about this than most, but I would define a value as it's like the foundational things that you value upon which everything in your life revolves, or ideally revolves, so that it's sort of, if you are living in accordance with your values, then all of your actions, all of your decisions are based on those. And for me, it's like, I'm going to steal this from somebody else, but really all values that people have are quote unquote good things. What it comes down to is you can really only prioritize so many things. And so your real values are the ones that are prioritized above other values.
Love that you said that. I think a lot of times when we think of values, people love to go to Google and be like, "Ooh, here's a 400 words that are values. I'm going to pick 3 or 5. That's not what I'm talking about." And we also always think of values of like what I want to be. It's aspirational. I think the values that you and I are talking about is like, you already got it. It's already happened to you. So I define a value is how you pay attention, how you give your attention. That is the most limited of all of your personal resources, energy, time, money, connections, knowledge, skills, attention. Attention is the most limited. So I like to think of it as your personal code of conduct. And it's about not writing it, saying this is how I want to be. The first step is just, how are you already doing it? And the way to find that out is make a list of your proudest moments in your life, or stories that you find yourself constantly telling to other people, or stories that people constantly tell about you. And then ask yourself, what are the characteristics of these stories? Why do they keep coming up? And I think values don't have to be words. They could be a drawing. It could be a sentence. It could be a phrase.
One that I find is really useful is what really bothers you, and not in like an intellectual, like, I'm really against this, but like you viscerally respond negatively in the moment to something. That usually is a pretty good indication that you value not that thing.
Like the second things get overcomplicated, my simplicity value is like a 5-alarm alarm going off. I'm like, no, it just happened to me this morning. And I'm like, this is getting overcomplicated. And I do not like complication. Go to my website. It's pretty simple. And I do it that way because I don't want to be consumed by all these little design decisions every single day. I just want to teach. I want to coach. I want to inspire. I want all my energy going to that. That's why I keep things simple.
So I was going to say, in the interest of time and making sure that we wrap this up, I think that this is like a really powerful, and in the interest of simplicity, also succinct sort of encapsulation of this lesson, which we could probably talk for a while about how to discover your values. But I think you've actually kind of already alluded to the really critical thing, which is like you have them and it's revealed by your behaviors and your responses.
You have to start bringing awareness to that, and then you can understand what your values are. And then to your point, once you've recognized them, you've written them down, do no more than 5, because then they'll get diluted. that is how you want to start making your decisions. You know, when people have trouble making decisions, I'm like, they don't understand their values.
Mm. The one thing that I will add is I do think that you can change your values, but it's not about putting something new on the list. In order to change your values, you actually have to do different things. Like
Well,
you said,
I would add to it, it's an intention. It's an intention first, and then it becomes a value.
yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And you could fail. You could say, you know what, I'd really like to value, this other thing higher, but if you don't follow through, then it turns out that, that's not actually your value.
And it's also feeling okay with your values. There's no shame. Like, this is just who you are. And just calmly saying, like, it's not right or wrong. It's just like, I got limited time and energy. This is how I like to go roll through the world. As
Yep.
long as you're not hurting anybody else. That's all.
And using that as a way of just saying no to the myriad things that other people think are important.
I just had a podcast request, like a quick little value. I just want people to be in alignment with themselves and that hierarchies. And it was a multi-level marketing business. And I just have a policy. I don't interview anybody in my podcast who's doing an MLM. And I had to say, I'm really sorry. This is the reason. If they ever do have a business on their own outside of it, I'd be happy to talk to them. But it's one of my values. I'm not going to support that.
So, Stephen, before we wrap up, I want to just give you a chance to share a little about this accelerator program you run, which I think is pretty cool. And just give us a quick story on that, and then also where people can go to learn more about you and your work.
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate it. Go to lifeskillsthatmatter.com/accelerator. I believe more of us are going to be working for ourselves than ever before. The way the economy is changing. Work is fundamentally changing as we know it. It's happening faster and faster. And there's going to be a widening spectrum of what self-employment looks like. I was one of those people who never thought they would ever work for themselves, and then I was able to figure it out. And that's how I've designed this accelerator, really for somebody who's like, I want more freedom. I have an idea of some kind of work that I would like to do. I would like to work on my own. I want to work outside of a hierarchy. I'm sick of that. And that's the person that I really love working with. Somebody who is creative. For whatever reason, I tend to attract a lot of introverts, heart-centered kind of entrepreneurs, people who want to build a business without debt. I'm a big believer in that. But a big part of the accelerator is you are the first resource of your business and its biggest obstacle. So the first entire week we just spend on you because we never evaluate ourselves as a resource of another business. And again, it's all about building habits. You come away with a year-long strategic plan of all of your actions and habits over the next year. We also this is a live group coaching program. Again, I'll probably have one someday too. You can do an on-demand course, but there's a much lower probability of you actually making the transition from employment to self-employment without a tight-knit community of accountability. It's a very intense 30 days that everybody just came through it. They're like, gosh, you are right. I am so not the same person I was when I started this thing. Because there's daily assignments and we do video mastermind calls. So the next one starts January 24th. So if you're interested, you go to lifeskillsmatter.com/accelerator. And maybe you and I can talk about doing a little special offer. I'm not there yet, but I'd love to do that for your people.
Cool. Thanks, man. Well, Stephen, really, really good to talk to you again. I'm really excited to see you in just a couple of weeks. So thanks a lot for coming on and sharing.
And you're going to be on my show soon, so we can continue the conversation.
Amen. Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right. See ya.